is Dave Stotts, and I'm the host of a show called Drive Through History. My job has taken me to a lot of amazing places that have been written about in the history books. But today I'll be talking about the amazing history of a book. The most influential book ever written, in fact, the Bible.
Hello, David. Nice landing, as usual.
Thanks, Eitan. Hatzor was once the largest stronghold city in northern Canaan. When the Israelites arrived, they needed to conquer the city. Here you can see the ruins of Hatzor from the time of Joshua's conquest, as described in the book of Joshua. The book of 1 Kings tells us that about 400 years later, King Solomon rebuilt and fortified Hatzor to be a stronghold city of his own. If you come here today, you can see remains that go back to the Israelites, a gate to the city, huge storehouses, and a major water system. Archaeological sites like this allow us to connect the past to the present. Discoveries are being made every day that help us better understand the Bible. Many have said that the Bible is one of the most incredible stories in history. But there's another incredible story to be told. That is the astonishing history of the Bible's transmission and survival over the centuries.
Okay, wonderful to see you, David.
Despite war, burning, persecution, and pillaging, the Bible has pressed on to become the perennial bestseller of all time. Okay. The ruins at Hatzor allow us to discover the world where the ancient Israelites lived. While residing in towns like these, they passed down their stories they recorded in biblical books such as Joshua, Kings, Samuel, and Jeremiah. In time, accounts were written down, copied, and shared through the centuries. In the last century, we uncovered the earliest biblical manuscripts ever found, remarkable evidence for the history of the written Bible. In 1946, on the northwest shore of the Dead Sea, Bedouin shepherds made one of the greatest manuscript discoveries of all time here in these caves, the Dead Sea Scrolls. They are comprised of the remains of hundreds of separate scrolls, represented by tens of thousands of fragments. Based on various dating methods, we know that most of the Dead Sea Scrolls were originally produced between 200 BC and AD 70. Making them collectively the oldest examples of the Hebrew Bible to survive anywhere in the world. Some of the biblical texts discovered here above Qumran are in substantial agreement with the Masoretic text, which is used as the basis for many translations of the Hebrew Bible we still read today. The Dead Sea Scrolls demonstrate their careful transmission over time. Now let's continue on to the New Testament of the Bible and travel to Rome for the next part of our journey. The central focus of the New Testament of the Christian Bible is a man known as Jesus of Nazareth, and the church founded in his name. The Gospel of Luke tells us that as Caesar Augustus ruled from here in Rome, Jesus was born in the small Judean town of Bethlehem. He had a short ministry in Galilee and Judea, and he was crucified just outside the walls of Jerusalem. Soon after, stories of his resurrection spread from Israel throughout the entire Roman Empire. Here in Rome, emperors such as Nero, Trajan, and Diocletian were threatened by the spread of Christianity and did everything they could to suppress it. By about AD 325, the growing influence of Christianity finally won out, when Roman Emperor Constantine, whose arch you can see right behind me, commissioned the production of 50 complete Bibles. In 382, Pope Damasus I asked a scholar named Jerome to produce one standard Latin text of the Gospels. Later, Jerome was here in Bethlehem, where he spent the rest of his life as a hermit in a cave. It was here where he and a few associates completed the Latin version of the Hebrew Bible in about AD 405. By the end of the 16th century, Jerome's entire Latin version, known as the Vulgate, would be reconfirmed as the official Latin Bible of the Roman Catholic Church. For the next 1,000 years or so, we're in the Middle Ages, or what some call the Dark Ages. During this period, the main story surrounding the Bible was the translation and preservation of the text. Small groups of dedicated monks and scribes, often living in desolate places around the world, would hand copy the biblical texts. Despite raids, wars, fires, and diseases, the biblical manuscripts survived. During these years, early rabbis compiled Jewish laws on a variety of topics based on the written Torah and the oral tradition. Rabbis collected laws in the Mishnah. This document was discussed by sages and collected in 2 versions of the Talmud. Together, these documents served as authoritative interpretations of the laws and teachings of the Hebrew Bible for future generations. During the Middle Ages, rabbinic scholars such as Rashi and Maimonides wrote key commentaries and philosophical works related to the study of the Torah and the rest of Jewish tradition. It remained only for the invention of printing to make Jewish traditional texts accessible to all who wished to study them. Near the end of the Middle Ages, a man named Johannes Gutenberg, born here in Mainz, Germany, developed his version of movable metal type, a typecasting machine, and an oil-based ink printer. Using the text of Jerome's Vulgate, Gutenberg and his partner began printing the Latin Bible in 1452. Despite financial issues and delays, they completed the first Gutenberg Bible by early 1454. The first printing of the Gutenberg Bible really demonstrated the beginnings of mass Bible production, and within 50 years, approximately 100,000 Bibles were in print. As printing advanced and presses started operating around Europe, Bible translations in languages other than Latin began to grow in popularity. During the early 16th century, scholars such as Erasmus, Luther, and Tyndale came on the scene and created a whole new wave of Bibles in Greek and in common languages such as German and English. By the mid-16th century, another 5 English translations were published, including King Henry VIII's Great Bible, the Coverdale Bible, the Matthew Bible, the Geneva Bible, and the Bishop's Bible. In the early 17th century, the first edition of the King James Bible was published in England, portions of which were translated here at Westminster Abbey. When the King James Bible was combined with the power of the printing press and worldwide colonialism, it soon became the first global Bible. It dominated that position for over 300 years. During the 19th and 20th centuries, Bible societies and Bible translations took off. Today, the Bible has been translated into over 500 different languages. Some of these languages didn't even have a written form until the translation of the Bible. The Bible has been carefully transmitted through time, technology, and culture, from rare manuscripts to near universal accessibility. The Bible is continually being researched and more fully understood through new discoveries. Many people think that the further we progress from the ancient world of the Bible, the more disconnected we become from this old book. But actually, today's science is helping us better understand how carefully the Bible has been transmitted through time. The latest technologies and imaging techniques are now providing an even greater understanding of the history of the Bible.
Exit now. What are you waiting?
Let's begin by exploring some of the great archaeological discoveries surrounding the stories in the Bible. I'm here in Jerusalem at the Israel Museum to start our quest. Around 3200 BC, the earliest known system of writing, cuneiform, emerged in ancient Sumer, the area we know today as Iraq. Remarkably, these impressions made on clay tablets present similar traditions with those we find in the Bible. Accounts of creation, a great flood, and legal codes are all found in writings from peoples around the ancient Near East. The Bible is an incredible story, but what about the history? What can we learn from archaeology beyond the biblical accounts? Archaeology provides remarkable insight into the stories of the Bible. In many instances, archaeology allows us to compare what's found in the ground to what's written on the page. It's a privilege being your host through this journey of discovery. Allow me to give you a peek at what Israel has to offer. We can go anywhere in this sweet vintage Jeep. It's got no top, but I was assured that it never rains here. Aww. Fail. So let's go check out a number of archaeological sites that bring to life the world where the Bible began. Mentioned more than 50 times in the Bible, Jericho was an ancient city of strategic importance in Israel's history. Archaeology has now confirmed the location of this fortified city of walls and towers that guarded the entry to Canaan from the east. The Merneptah Stela is an upright stone slab measuring over 10 feet tall that contains carved hieroglyphic text dating to approximately 1208 BC. This Egyptian monument celebrates the military victories of Pharaoh Merneptah over his neighbors. It includes several cities in the land of Canaan, plus Israel. The Egyptian writing identifies Israel as a group of people living in Canaan in the 13th century BC. Lachish defended the interior of southern Israel, known as Judah. In order to attack Jerusalem and the rest of Judah, an invading army would pass Lachish, which guarded the final mountain pass. In about 701 BC, the Assyrians laid siege to Lachish. Here at the site, archaeologists have discovered the Assyrian battle layer, including hundreds of Assyrian arrowheads and approximately 1,500 skulls. Excavations also have revealed that the Assyrians built this siege ramp up the city wall, allowing the soldiers to charge up the ramp and into the city. as portrayed in ancient wall carvings known as the Lachish reliefs. The Lachish reliefs, discovered at biblical Nineveh in present-day Iraq, are carvings showing the siege and conquest of Lachish by the Assyrians. One relief shows details of the battle between the Assyrians and the Judeans, including a depiction of the siege ramp we saw at the archaeology site. Another relief shows Judean captives being led into slavery by the Assyrians after the victory. For the people of Judah, this traumatic experience triggered centuries of reflection and writing. Ancient portions of the city of Jerusalem, dating back to the time of King David's initial conquest, were discovered and excavated in 1978. Prior to this time, nothing apart from the Bible was known about King David's Jerusalem, which has now revealed walls, towers, and the famous Pool of Siloam, which was discovered in 2004. Speaking of David, in 1993, archaeologists discovered a stone inscription at the ancient city of Dan, which refers to the House of David. The Tel Dan inscription, dating to the 9th century BC, provides a different view on a conflict also presented in the Bible. Archaeological discoveries continue to reveal more and more of the biblical world to us. Research continues to help us better understand the people, places, and events of the Bible. We hope you're enjoying the history of the Bible. Let's continue on here in Israel and then travel to Rome to tell the story of the Christian Bible and how it started spreading around the Mediterranean. Jesus of Nazareth was born during the Second Temple period of the Jewish people. The story of his birth, ministry, death, and resurrection motivated the writing of the New Testament. The teachings of Jesus were first spread by word of mouth. This was followed by written accounts of his ministry, known as the Gospels, and letters of instruction. The book of Acts is a history of the first years of the Christian church and its spread throughout the Mediterranean. Let's go check out a few discoveries related to the religious texts of this new Christian movement. And there's no better way to drive through Israel than my trusty vintage Jeep. What it lacks in comfort, it more than makes up for with a worn-out clutch. There's still no better way to take in all the history of this amazing place. After leaving Nazareth, Jesus established his ministry around the Sea of Galilee. According to the gospel texts, the town of Capernaum became home base for his teaching and travels. By historical accounts, Capernaum was a booming fishing town on the main Roman highway linking Damascus in Syria to Alexandria in Egypt. Capernaum was one of the northernmost towns in the region of Galilee, governed by Herod Antipas. This impressive white limestone synagogue dates to the 4th century AD. But right down here, underneath it, lies a 1st century AD black basalt synagogue, one of the oldest Jewish synagogues in the world. Remarkably, that structure dates to the period that Jesus would have taught. Just south of the synagogue are the ruins of an ancient house originally constructed in the 2nd century BC. This black basalt house has an early tradition as being the home of Peter from the gospel accounts. The house was converted to a simple church, and most scholars agree that this is one of the earliest Christian houses of worship yet discovered. Our next stop is Rome, to witness the next chapter in the story of Christianity. And if you're going to go to Rome, what better car to drive than a fly yellow Alfa Romeo? This car looks good even when it's leaking fuel on the side of the road. Never a good thing. Okay, so we lose a few cool points when the production crew has to push start it. The story of Christianity spread throughout the Mediterranean region. Despite severe persecution, copies of the New Testament circulated among Christians throughout the Middle East and in southern Europe. Attacks against the Christian text peaked in AD 303 when Roman Emperor Diocletian ordered the destruction of all Christian writings. However, about 25 years later, Emperor Constantine commissioned the production of 50 copies of the Christian Bible, and over the next several decades, the Roman Empire finally embraced the cultural influence of Christianity. During this same period, Jews also suffered persecution under Roman rule. Following years of tension, 3 major Jewish revolts broke out against Rome. The first saw the destruction of Jerusalem and the Holy Temple in AD 70. The Arch of Titus, here in Rome, gives a powerful testimony to the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. The entire city, including the temple, were utterly destroyed by the Romans under Titus. This arch depicts the looting of the temple treasures. Later failed revolts further scattered the Jewish people in a diaspora stretching from Spain to India. At the same time, there developed renewed emphasis on an inner spiritual life centered on the great collections of rabbinic teaching, Mishnah, Talmud, and Midrash that were brought to completion after the Christianization of the Roman Empire. This was an era in which synagogue worship replaced temple sacrifice, and study of the Torah became a sacred duty for all Jews. The synagogue became a miniature temple that was carried by the Jews to all the lands of their exile, lands in which they would continue to make great strides in the study of the Bible and the Jewish tradition. Between the 5th and 10th centuries, Jewish scholars added a system of notation and punctuation to the Hebrew Bible, completing the Masoretic text. This version spread throughout the world and became the standard for interpreting the Hebrew Bible. Over the following centuries, as the Samaritan tradition anchored itself in northern Israel and the Jewish faith spread in enclaves throughout the Roman Empire and beyond, numerous Christian traditions emerged, including the Catholic, Eastern Orthodox, Oriental Orthodox, and Assyrian Church of the East. All of these faith traditions claimed and used some portion of the Bible. While some perspectives on the Bible did not endure, other traditions, such as the many Protestant churches, would not emerge for hundreds of years. Let's continue our trip through the history of the Bible, with visits to various sites throughout Europe to show how the Bible became the focus of a radical rethinking of faith, society, and technology. After the collapse of the Western Roman Empire, the Bible went on a wild ride through the Middle Ages to the Renaissance. During this time, there was a growing demand for access to the Christian Bible in local languages. The next chapter in the history of the Bible takes us from Rome to Germany. I do love Germany. Gorgeous scenery, impeccably engineered cars like the vintage Mercedes-Benz I'm in, and world-class museums. The Gutenberg Museum in Mainz, Germany was my first stop. Prior to printing, each Bible had to be copied by hand, one at a time. The impact of Gutenberg's printing press upon the Bible emerged quickly. By the beginning of the 16th century, approximately 100,000 Bibles were in print. Some scholars have said that the printing press impacted the world more than any single event in the last 1,000 years. As Gutenberg's invention spread to Italy in the late 1400s, Jews came to the country from Spain and Portugal, increasing the demand for Hebrew printed books. Italian printers such as Daniel Bomberg were among the first to print the Hebrew Bible and the Talmud in the Hebrew language. Bomberg's impact on Hebrew printing was so significant that some of his innovations and layouts are still used today. Despite some persecution and controversy, and using the work of scholars like Erasmus, reformers such as Luther and Tyndale pushed ahead with translations of the Christian Bible into the local languages of the common people. Erasmus was born in Holland in the late 1460s. He was educated in a monastery, ordained a priest, and later became one of the foremost humanist scholars of the Renaissance. In 1512, Erasmus, unhappy with the quality of the Vulgate, began to work on a new translation of the New Testament, from Greek into Latin. In 1516, Erasmus published his first New Testament with parallel Greek and Latin texts. Because the first edition was rushed for a publisher, it contained a number of errors, making later editions necessary. Erasmus's second edition from 1519 became the basis for Luther's German translation of the New Testament. And Erasmus's third edition from 1522 became the basis for Tyndale's translation of the first printed English New Testament. Many know Martin Luther from his role in the Protestant Reformation and his 95 Theses that it is said he nailed to the church door here in Wittenberg. It was these activities that got him excommunicated from the church. After leaving his hearing with the emperor at the Diet of Worms, Luther was kidnapped by horsemen. But it was a setup. A wealthy supporter, Frederick III, intercepted Luther and delivered him to the safety of Wartburg Castle, here at Eisenach. Within a year of protective custody here at Wartburg Castle, Luther performed the extraordinary feat of translating the New Testament from Erasmus's Greek into German in this very room. By 1534, Luther and his associates completed the translation of the Old Testament from Hebrew into German and published the entire Luther Bible. Luther's version quickly became popular and influential, contributing to the development of the German language and literature. It also influenced other common language translations, such as Tyndale's English Bible. William Tyndale was an English scholar and a contemporary of Luther. He studied at Oxford and Cambridge during the 16th century. Tyndale was a gifted linguist, fluent in 7 languages, including Latin, Hebrew, and Greek. In 1523, Tyndale traveled to London, seeking permission from the bishop to translate Erasmus's Greek New Testament into English. But Tyndale was denied permission and moved to Germany, where he continued his work and completed the English New Testament in 1526. Soon, Tyndale's New Testament was smuggled into England and became very popular. Tyndale set the linguistic style for English New Testament translations for centuries to come. There was a studied simplicity to his language, which was designed to make the New Testament accessible to the common person. However, English authorities, including Thomas More, condemned Tyndale's translation on the basis of that same popular language. Eventually, Tyndale was tried for heresy related to his religious beliefs. He was condemned to die by strangulation and burning at the stake in 1536. We're approaching the end of our journey through the history of the Bible. We hope you've enjoyed our quick tour. Let's end in England, where we learned a story about how the Bible finally went global. My choice of car for England was the compact but powerful vintage Mini Cooper. I love this little car. Steering on the right and driving on the left took some getting used to, But it was a good reminder that despite the shared language, there are many differences here in England, like these odd red booths that I guess you're supposed to step into when you talk on the phone. The Mini really did give me a front row seat to the lush English countryside and was the perfect companion for the last leg of our journey through the history of the Bible. Within decades of William Tyndale's execution in 1536, another 5 English translations of the Bible were published, including King Henry VIII's Great Bible, the Coverdale Bible, the Matthew Bible, the Geneva Bible, and the Bishop's Bible. Over the next few decades, Tyndale's translation formed the basis of other English translations, culminating in the world-changing King James Bible of 1611. The King James is the key to this period in the history of the Christian Bible, so the first part of our journey takes us about an hour's drive from London to Hampton Court, the historic location of a meeting that led directly to James's commissioning of the King James Bible. In 1603, when James VI of Scotland was crowned as James I of England, there were 2 primary English translations of the Bible in use: the official Bishop's Bible, characterized by obscure, inflated language, and the common Geneva Bible, derived from Tyndale's simpler phrasing. In January of 1604, James, in response to a petition from the Reform-minded Puritans, convened a conference of theologians here at Hampton Court. As part of the conference, the Puritan John Reynolds proposed that a new Bible translation be made to correct the current texts. James supported the idea since he despised the then popular Geneva Bible, not so much because of its translation quality, but because of the borderline revolutionary notes that had crept into the margins. King James placed the project under the control of the Bishop of London, Richard Bancroft, who selected the editors and established the rules for their work. This would not be an entirely new translation from the ancient languages, but a revision of the final edition of the Bishop's Bible, with reference to others if necessary. But in the end, it's estimated that 83% of the King James Bible derives from Tyndale, either directly or indirectly through other Bibles. The King James Bible was produced between 1604 and 1611 by around 50 learned men, each of whom was a distinguished scholar from Oxford, Cambridge, or the Church of England. Now, the task was divided among 6 committees of these men, 2 at Oxford University, 2 at Cambridge University, and 2 here at Westminster Abbey. Many of the revisions to the Bible were made here in the Jerusalem chamber at Westminster Abbey. This room still looks much as it did in 1611. But as it turns out, the King James Bible wasn't really completed with the 1611 version. Actually, it underwent numerous revisions over the course of the first 150 years of its existence. So, scholars at both Oxford and Cambridge determined it was time to produce an updated text. The Oxford edition of 1769 became the standard version and continues almost unchanged to this day. As the British and other colonial empires spread European influence around the globe, they carried Christianity and the Bible with them. The dominance of the British Empire led to the King James Bible being the single most common version of the Bible in the world. The continual growth of the British Empire carried the King James Bible around the globe. American colonists even used the rhetoric of the King James as an inspiration during their revolution. Later, the Industrial Revolution allowed newly formed Bible societies to print and distribute the King James Bible on a scale previously unimaginable. The King James Bible became the most dominant English translation, and it remained so for at least 350 years. Today, it is still a top-selling Bible translation, but it has been joined by numerous modern translations. And look where technology has taken us today. From stone tablets to electronic tablets. The Bible, translated in the language of a new generation.